In the silent space between waking and sleep, your mind begins constructing worlds with a precision that shouldn't be possible. You close your eyes, drift downward, and suddenly you are walking through a city you have never visited. Yet your feet know the pavement. Your eyes know the skyline. Every corner feels mapped, every alley strangely familiar, as if some version of you has walked there 100 times. This is not imagination stitched together from random memories. Neuroimaging has revealed something far stranger. When you dream of an unvisited place, your brain activates as if you are recalling a real city from your past. Not a fantasy, not a hallucination, a memory. But of what? Scientists analyzing high-resolution fMRI scans noticed a strange pattern. When subjects dreamed of unfamiliar cities, the hippocampus, the brain's mapmaker, fired in the same structured ways it fires when recalling real places. Grid cells and place cells sparked in ordered rhythmic patterns identical to those used during real-world navigation. These are not the firing patterns of fantasy. They are the patterns of memory. But whose memory? One participant described a sprawling, foggy harbor city with narrow steel stairways curling around old buildings. He insisted he had never seen anything like it. Yet his neural activity matched the pattern of someone remembering a real physical location. Another participant dreamed of a warm, dusty city with bridges stacked 3 levels high and markets hidden beneath them. Again, her brain activity looked like a memory scan, not a dream. When researchers overlaid the neural maps from multiple nights, the layout matched. The dream city was consistent. It had landmarks, it had structure, it had history. A place that didn't exist, yet existed in her mind as a fully mapped environment. This raises impossible questions. Why does the mind construct stable cities you've never visited? Why does your brain treat them as real? One explanation suggests your mind collects fragments of places, photos, scenes from films, glimpses from online images, and merges them into a coherent whole. But this cannot explain the stability. Most dreams dissolve, shift, warp. Yet, many people return to the same dream city repeatedly, sometimes over years. And every time, the neuroimaging patterns line up like coordinates on a map kept in the dark. Some neuroscientists propose a deeper idea. The brain might hold ancestral spatial templates, ancient architectural instincts shaped over thousands of years. Just like language has universal grammar structures, perhaps space itself has universal blueprints. When the dreaming brain constructs a city, it may unconsciously follow these ancient mental blueprints, creating places none of us have lived in, but all of us somehow recognize. But this theory breaks down when 2 unrelated people describe nearly identical dream cities. And yes, this has happened. Different dreamers have spoken of circular cities with radiant towers, of spiral bridges curling around glowing fountains, of markets under suspended walkways. Their descriptions match, their neural map patterns match, but their lives, experiences, and memories do not. An alternative theory emerges from predictive processing science. The brain constantly generates predictions of the world before perception catches up. Dreams may be the extreme version of this predictive machinery. Instead of predicting the next second of your life, your brain might be simulating entire environments in advance, a sandbox where it tests navigation, memory, and orientation. In this view, your dream cities are prototypes, simulations of places your mind creates to practice survival. If this were true, dreaming would be less like storytelling and more like world building. But neuroimaging complicates this too. The dream maps behave like stored memories, not simulations. They persist. They return with detail. They can be navigated deliberately by the dreamer, and every time, the hippocampal activity matches the same internal layout. This means your brain may be storing dream cities the same way it stores childhood hometowns. They exist in a separate archive, the geography of the unreal. Then comes the most chilling phenomenon, pre-experiential mapping. There are documented cases where someone dreams of a location, then, months later, sees a real place, online or in physical life, and feels a shock of recognition. When scanned, their neural activity matches the dream memory rather than forming a new memory. It is as if the dream predicted the place, or as if the mind had already mapped it long before the person consciously encountered it. This could be coincidence, or it could mean the brain is accessing patterns far beyond what we consciously absorb. Some researchers whisper about a stranger possibility, that the mind might be tapping into collective spatial data, absorbing patterns scattered across the world. With billions of images passing through digital networks every day, some believe the subconscious gathers micro-fragments, angles of buildings, colors of streets, shapes of skylines, and reconstructs them. In dreams, these fragments assemble into full environments. Neuroimaging shows that these environments follow real architectural logic, even if no actual city matches them perfectly. Yet, even this fails to explain the impossible structures, floating walkways, spiraling roads like seashells, towers bending like molten glass. These are not stitched from real fragments. These are inventions. And still, they activate as real memories in the hippocampus. Even more mysterious are the cases where dreamers report updates to their dream cities over time. A bridge under construction in one dream appears fully built in a later dream. A district that was once empty suddenly fills with shops or glowing structures. When these dreamers undergo neuroimaging, the updated dream city triggers altered but consistent map patterns, suggesting the brain has rewritten a portion of the geography. This is not how imagination behaves. Imagination does not maintain continuity with this kind of architectural accuracy. Some speculate that these evolving dream cities reflect emotional states. When life feels restricted, the dream streets become narrow. When life opens up, the city expands. But other cases contradict this. People in stressful periods have dreamed of wide, futuristic megacities, illuminated in silver light, while people in peaceful periods have dreamed of cramped, unsettling labyrinths. The emotional theory cannot account for architectural consistency. So, what truth hides beneath these neural maps? Perhaps your brain carries more than memories. Perhaps it carries possibilities, unlived geographies that shape themselves in the dark, waiting for you to wander through them. Neuroimaging cannot yet explain why these places feel older than your waking life, or why they seem to anticipate your movement before you make it. But the scans do not lie. Your mind draws maps of worlds beyond your experience, and somewhere inside the silent architecture of your neurons, an entire world might be waiting for you to return to it. The oldest stories humans ever carved into clay claim something almost unbelievable, that before you entered this world, before breath touched your lungs or time shaped your identity, you walked through another realm first, a rehearsal space where your soul practiced the life it was about to live. The ancient Sumerians believed that existence was not a one-way descent into birth, but a cycle in which consciousness prepared itself through vivid, structured experiences before stepping into physical reality. They called these realms the pre-life rehearsal spaces, places where the soul rehearsed choices, relationships, challenges, and futures long before entering the material world. For the Sumerians, life was too precise to be accidental. They believed the emotional familiarity you feel with strangers, the strange competence you have in skills you never learned, the déjà vu you experience in places you've never visited. None of this was coincidence. These were memories leaking from a place you had existed before your birth, a place where your soul practiced the blueprint of this life. And when you sleep, when your consciousness drifts beyond your waking identity, you sometimes return to these rehearsal realms. The Sumerians described them with astonishing detail. They said the soul wandered through landscapes shaped not by physical geography, but by intention. Cities with streets formed from unmade decisions, temples built from potential futures, courtyards shaped by unresolved fears, gardens constructed from unrealized desires. These were not fantasies. They were training grounds. Here the soul rehearsed grief before feeling it, joy before earning it, courage before needing it. And the reason you sometimes dream of places you have never visited or experience emotions that feel older than your life is because fragments of these rehearsals still echo through your consciousness. In their mythology, these rehearsal spaces were supervised by divine scribes, spiritual architects who recorded the patterns of every potential life. The Sumerians believed that before birth, each soul negotiated the major nodes of its human journey. Not rigid fate, but pivotal convergences. Who you would love, who you would lose, where your courage would be tested, where your identity would fracture, and where it would grow. The details were fluid, but the emotional map was set. You would walk through challenges you had rehearsed but forgotten. You would recognize certain people instantly because your soul had met them in the pre-life realm. The rehearsal made the encounter feel destined. Modern people call these feelings intuition, instinct, déjà vu. The Sumerians called them memory. Their tablets describe that in the pre-life realm, souls did not have bodies the way we understand them. Instead, they had form without flesh, shapes woven from intention. Movement was different there. Instead of walking across ground, you moved across meaning. Instead of traveling through space, you traveled through potential. One ancient text claims that souls practice conflict resolution by cycling through hundreds of potential versions of an argument until they understood the lesson embedded within it. Another claims that souls rehearsed heartbreak in symbolic landscapes, crossing deserts of loss or sinking into seas of longing, so when heartbreak arrived in physical life, it would not shatter them completely. Everything in the pre-life realm was metaphor and training, but the emotional lessons were real. And in dreams, especially the deep ones that feel too coherent, too old, too symbolic to be random, some people report wandering through landscapes that resemble the Sumerian descriptions. Places with impossible architecture, structures built from emotion, symbols woven into the ground. Neuroanthropologists studying these dreams note that many people experience similar motifs. Staircases that lead nowhere, ancient walls covered in shifting symbols, long corridors lined with doors that each open to different versions of yourself. These motifs appear across cultures, across generations, across people who have never shared stories. The Sumerians would say, "These are not dreams, these are rehearsals resurfacing." One of the most compelling aspects of the Sumerian belief is the idea that pre-life rehearsal spaces mirror your soul's future challenges. If you were destined to struggle with abandonment, your pre-life realm might include empty rooms, broken bridges, or endless open spaces where companions disappear when you turn your head. If you were destined to seek truth, your realm might contain libraries with locked rooms, temples with hidden chambers, or mirrors that show different versions of you, depending on how deeply you look. In physical life, these symbols convert into experiences, relationships, obstacles, quests, fears. But the emotional root was planted before birth. This belief becomes even more intense when examined through the lens of modern psych. Researchers who study dreams, memory, intuition, and subconscious pattern recognition have observed phenomena that eerily align with the Sumerian view. For example, some people display inexplicable emotional expertise, an ability to comfort strangers with uncanny precision, or a deep intuition for dangerous situations, despite never having lived through them. Sumerians believed such traits were rehearsed in pre-life, not learned in this world, but remembered from another. Even more intriguing are recurring dreams shared by unrelated people, dreams of vast stone hallways, rivers of shimmering light, or enormous plazas lined with silent observers. These dream motifs match those described in ancient Sumerian hymns, despite a 5,000-year gap. People thousands of miles apart, with entirely disconnected lives, dream the same symbolic arenas. According to the Sumerians, this is because every human soul trains in the same cosmic architecture. The details differ, but the framework remains universal. Our subconscious carries the blueprint. In the Sumerian worldview, time in the pre-life realm moves differently. A soul may rehearse dozens of potential lives, but only one is chosen for physical incarnation. The others remain stored like unused scripts, and sometimes fragments of those unrealized lives slip into dreams. This would explain why you sometimes dream of being a person you never were, why you might dream of living in a different era, in a different body, with different memories. It is not fantasy. It is leftover rehearsal. One ancient Sumerian narrative describes a soul who practiced life as a musician, a shepherd, and a warrior before finally choosing the life of a farmer. The unused identities remain stored in the cosmic archive of the soul. When physical life became difficult, dreams from the unused rehearsals surfaced, dreams of battle when he needed bravery, dreams of music when he needed comfort. The Sumerians called these echoes shadows of the unchosen paths. Today, psychologists call similar phenomena parallel dream lives, where individuals experience consistent stories across hundreds of dreams, even though these dream lives do not match their waking identities. The most haunting idea from the Sumerians is that before birth, each soul walks through the key emotional moments of the life to come. Moments of love, loss, confusion, betrayal, courage, transformation. Not to prevent them, but to prepare for them. Physical life is not the test, it is the performance. The rehearsal comes first. The forgetting comes second. The living comes last. And the reason these rehearsals are forgotten is simple. If you remembered them clearly, the lessons would lose their power. Yet the Sumerians believed forgetting is never complete. Memory lingers in emotion. When you meet someone and feel instant familiarity, when you enter a place and feel inexplicably at home, when you face a crisis with knowledge you shouldn't have, these are reminders, leaks in the veil, faint memories of the rehearsal room, and dreams. Those surreal, symbolic, emotionally charged realms are the easiest doorway back. Some modern neuroscientists find this myth unsettling because of how neatly it aligns with emerging research. Studies show that dreams often contain emotional rehearsals, simulated versions of fears, hopes, and social interactions. The brain tests outcomes before you face them in waking life. In a sense, we still rehearse before we live. And many dream symbols mimic the same archetypes described in Sumerian texts: bridges, thresholds, labyrinths, watchers, shadow figures, symbolic rooms, endless staircases. Neuroscience sees these as cognitive constructs. The Sumerians saw them as maps of the soul's rehearsal chamber. Perhaps both are true. Maybe the ancient belief wasn't mystical, it was observational. Maybe early humans recognized patterns in dreams we still experience today. Patterns the brain creates naturally as part of its preparation system. But there remains a deeper possibility that the Sumerians weren't just observing dreams. They were describing something far older, something woven into consciousness itself. Because if every life is rehearsed, then you are not wandering blindly. You are following a path your soul has walked before. And when you dream of strange places, vast temples, ancient courtyards, forgotten halls, it may not be imagination. It may be memory of the place where you practice being you. Imagine for a moment that your dreams, your déjà vu moments, your strange flashes of familiarity are not mistakes inside the brain, but remnants of something older, echoes from versions of reality that came before this one. If the universe is a simulation, if existence is a layered sequence of timelines that reset and restart, then your consciousness may not be as new as your birth certificate suggests. It may carry leftover frequencies, leftover impressions, leftover scars from previous runs of the world. These impressions are what some theorists call quantum echoes, faint, lingering traces of past simulations leaking into the present one like light through a cracked wall. You feel them not through logic, but through intuition, through dreams, through sudden flashes of knowing something you were never taught. The idea begins with one unsettling premise: that if the universe restarts, information should not technically survive. A reset should wipe everything clean. Every timeline should begin as a blank state. But quantum systems do not follow this rule. In physics, certain quantum states leave behind what are called non-classical residues, subtle patterns that influence the next state even if the system has been reset. In other words, a perfect reboot is impossible. Something always bleeds through. And if consciousness is a quantum process, and many researchers suspect it is, then pieces of who you were in a previous simulation might live inside you without you ever realizing. Some people feel this bleed through as instant knowledge. They walk into a place they have never visited and feel they've been there. They meet a stranger and feel an unexplainable bond or an unexplainable threat. They face a problem and intuitively know the solution without any experience. These are small things, but they pile up across a lifetime until you can no longer dismiss them. The patterns, the coincidences, the familiarity, they accumulate like faint fingerprints on glass. In modern neuroscience, déjà vu is often attributed to brief misfires in memory circuits. But even the most advanced scans cannot explain why some déjà vu episodes feel like full-body recognition, why some moments feel so scripted, so rehearsed, so impossibly familiar that you're convinced you've lived them before. The quantum echo theory suggests that you have lived them before, just not in this version of the world. These moments are fragments from previous simulations where the same scenario unfolded. The emotional resonance is the echo, the leftover imprint. The ancient Hindus hinted at this idea thousands of years ago. They believed creation moves through cycles. Universe is born, destroyed, and reborn endlessly. But nowhere in their texts does it say each cycle begins from scratch. Instead, each new creation carries the essence, the memory, the unresolved patterns of the one that came before. In their view, every cycle whispers to the next. Modern simulation theorists say the same thing. No system resets perfectly. Old data contaminates the new. The echoes persist. Quantum physics takes this further. At the smallest scale, particles behave as though they remember their past states, even when logically they shouldn't. If reality itself remembers, why wouldn't consciousness? Some people dream of historical eras they never studied, with absurd accuracy. Architecture, clothing, street layouts that match real ancient locations. Others have dreams of cities that do not exist, yet feel coherent, stable, lived in. Under quantum echo theory, these dreams could be bleed-throughs from previous runs, where the simulation loaded different timelines or different versions of civilization. In earlier cycles, maybe you lived under a different sky. Maybe you walked streets that were erased when the system rebooted. But the emotional memory remains imprinted deep inside you. Then there is the phenomenon researchers call precognitive residue, dreams that appear to predict future events, not because they can see the future, but because they are echoing events that happened in earlier cycles. If a simulation repeats major patterns, wars, inventions, pandemics, relationships, then the echoes of those events might leak forward into your dreams. You're not predicting the future, you're remembering a past version of it. Even animals show hints of this. Migration patterns follow perfect routes across continents, even when environmental cues fail. Certain species instinctively fear predators they have never encountered. Some believe these instincts are evolutionary, others believe they are quantum echoes, memories from previous cycles passed invisibly through the fabric of reality. Human phobias follow similar patterns. Some people have an irrational fear of deep water, even if they grew up nowhere near oceans. Some fear fire, though they have never been burned. Some have unexplainable terror during thunderstorms or heights or enclosed spaces. Quantum echo theorists suggest these fears may not be emotional glitches, but leftover trauma from previous simulation runs. Echoes of deaths or tragedies that shaped earlier versions of you. This concept becomes even more chilling when you consider recurring dreams that people have across decades. Not random shifting imagery, but consistent worlds. The same streets, the same houses, the same characters. These dream worlds evolve. New rooms appear, landscapes transform, buildings are added or destroyed over time. If imagination alone created them, why would the architecture remain consistent? Why would the emotional rules remain stable? If these dream realms are echoes of previous cycles, then it makes sense. Your mind is revisiting places it has been before, places stored deep within quantum memory fields. Another strange phenomenon is the sudden emotional clarity some people experience in crisis. A person who has never touched a weapon suddenly knows how to disarm an attacker. Someone who has never delivered first aid instinctively performs a procedure perfectly. A person under life-threatening pressure makes split-second decisions with military precision. Adrenaline can heighten instincts, but it cannot create expertise out of nowhere. Yet this expertise appears. Quantum echo theory offers one explanation. You learned these things before, in a previous run. The memory is not stored in the brain, but in the deeper layers of consciousness that survive, resets. You might feel it at random moments too, when you say something you didn't plan to say, when you reach for something before you consciously decide to, when a stranger's expression unlocks a wave of emotion that feels older than your life. These tiny slips are moments where your current self overlaps with past versions, like frames from two films projected on top of each other. Quantum computing provides an interesting analogy. When a quantum system collapses into a new state, remnants of its previous states exist as ghost patterns, mathematical forms that influence the next collapse, even if they are not part of the final output. Consciousness, if quantum in nature, may carry ghost patterns from previous versions of itself. You are not a single timeline. You are an accumulation of every version that has ever existed. This idea would also explain soul connections, The instant familiarity between certain people. Perhaps in previous cycles, your paths crossed repeatedly. Perhaps you loved them, or hated them, or died because of them. The echo carries through cycles, and when you meet that person again in this version of reality, you feel the emotional residue even though your conscious mind cannot name it. Something inside you remembers the pattern. And what about those strange moments where life feels scripted? When an event unfolds exactly as you somehow felt it would? When an encounter feels rehearsed? When a conversation feels like déjà vu, inside déjà vu? These moments might be places where the simulation repeats scenes from earlier runs. The universe, trying again, loading familiar sequences with small variations, and your consciousness, carrying quantum echoes, recognizes the template. One of the most haunting implications of this theory is the possibility that déjà vu is not a glitch. It is a checkpoint, a place in the timeline that repeats across cycles because something important must happen there. A decision, a conversation, a turning point. You feel déjà vu because your consciousness has stood here before in earlier runs, making similar choices. The echo reminds you that this moment matters. Quantum echo theory does not claim that you lived entire lives in previous cycles. It claims something more subtle, that the simulation engine reuses patterns, emotional arcs, relationship dynamics, environmental triggers, fear responses, intuitive skills, and your consciousness inherits residue from them. The echoes are not full memories. They are impressions, instincts, fragments, feelings without context, and dreams are the easiest place for them to surface. When the waking mind relaxes, when the ego softens, when identity dissolves just enough, the echoes rise, symbols from previous cycles mixing with the architecture of this one. A staircase you have never climbed, a house you have never entered, a voice you recognize but cannot place, a street that feels like home even though it exists nowhere on Earth. These are not fantasies. They may be fragments from earlier runs, resurfacing through cracks in the simulation's memory system. If this theory is true, then you are older than you think. Not in years, but in iterations. You are an echo carrying echoes, a branch of consciousness shaped by countless worlds behind you, countless timelines layered beneath the one you walk now. And each time you dream, each time you experience déjà vu, each time you feel an emotion that does not match the moment, you are brushing against the walls of those forgotten realities. Quantum echoes suggest that nothing in existence is ever truly lost, not even the worlds that end. They stay inside you as whispered memories, faint impressions guiding your steps. And when you feel them, when you sense that strange familiarity with the unfamiliar, maybe that's the universe reminding you of a truth too large to hold, that you have lived more than one life, more than one world, more than one version of yourself. And all of them are still inside you, echoing through the cracks of time, across continents, across languages, across cultures separated by oceans and centuries. There is something strange happening in the human mind. Something so consistent, so repeatable, so eerily aligned that it forces us to confront a possibility we've avoided for too long. That people around the world may be dreaming inside the same underlying architecture. Shared structures, shared symbols, shared landscapes, places that appear in the dreams of people who have never met, never spoken, never lived remotely similar lives. It's as if the human mind, no matter where it is born, taps into the same blueprint each night, like travelers entering different doorways but arriving in the same shadowed city. For decades, sleep researchers believed dreams were personal, shaped only by memory, trauma, culture, and daily stress. But a growing body of reports from remote villages, urban centers, monasteries, prisons, war zones, and modern cities reveals a stunning pattern. People often describe the same dream motifs, the same repeating structures, the same impossible landscapes, not broad themes, but precise architectural forms, staircases suspended in darkness, endless hallways made of shifting stone, ancient cities with spiraling towers, wide plazas filled with silent figures, vast libraries with impossible geometry. These dream spaces appear consistently in the minds of people who share nothing except being human. The deeper researchers dig, the stranger it becomes. In one cross-cultural study, Participants from South America, Japan, India, the Arctic, and Central Europe all described a nearly identical location, a long corridor with many doors, each leading to a different environment. They described the same echoing sound, the same flicker of light, the same sensation of being watched, the same instinct that each door held a different version of the self. None of these cultures share mythology. None share architectural history. Yet, they dream the same place. Reports stretch across generations. A grandmother in Peru and a teenager in Finland describe the same staircase of green stone, the same archway, the same sense that the place was waiting for them. Some might say coincidence, but the patterns repeat too precisely. When neuroimaging labs scan participants as they describe their recurring dream locations, the spatial maps their brains produced, patterns in the hippocampus, the parahippocampal cortex, and the visuospatial networks, look strikingly similar across individuals from different continents. Their brains were navigating different dreams, but the same architecture. Scientists who expected randomness found structure. They found symmetry. They found stability. But shared dream architecture suggests something more unsettling. Either all humans have inherited the same embedded mental templates, or dreams are not created in isolation at all. They are tapping into a shared layer of consciousness, a collective mental landscape beneath individuality. The first explanation, that the human mind carries universal spatial templates, goes back to Jung and ancient mythologies. But modern neuroimaging complicates this. Templates alone cannot explain the specificity of these shared places. Templates cannot predict why dream corridors are similar in length, why certain doorways appear in the same relative positions, why people describe identical symbols carved into walls they have never consciously seen. Templates cannot explain why someone in Ghana and someone in Norway both describe a pyramid filled with rooms that shift as soon as one leaves them. They never spoke, they never met. Yet, their dream architecture aligns. The second explanation is more provocative, that dreams occur in a shared mental network, a kind of subconscious internet older than language, older than culture, older than memory. In this view, dreams are not isolated events. They are visits to an interconnected territory where the unconscious minds of billions overlap. The dreamer doesn't invent the architecture, they enter it, like travelers walking into a world shaped by both personal and collective layers of consciousness. One of the most haunting examples comes from children. Young children across the world frequently describe dreams of the same features. The narrow stone bridge over black water, the tall, faceless figure at the bottom of a stairwell, the glowing door that appears only in peripheral vision, the long hallway ringing with faint whispers. Children who share no language describe these things in near-identical terms. Their drawings match. Their emotional reactions match. Their fear or fascination matches. Before culture shapes their imagination, before films influence their visual vocabulary, they dream the same symbols. Where do they come from? Anthropologists studying indigenous tribes discovered that many ancient cultures had already identified these shared dream structures thousands of years ago. Aboriginal Australians speak of the dreaming tracks, invisible pathways through a spiritual landscape that all humans wander during sleep. Some tribes in Africa describe dream temples where ancestral spirits gather, and their descriptions match the architecture reported in modern dream accounts. Ancient Sumerians spoke of the Hall of Doors, a structure where souls choose their paths. Chinese Taoists wrote about dream bridges linking the waking world to the hidden one. These cultures never communicated, yet they mapped the same dream spaces. Maybe they were not imagining different realms. Maybe they were describing the same place from different angles. In neurobiology, there is a concept called default mode network synchrony, where the brain enters a state of deep internal coordination. Some researchers believe that when people sleep, their brains may tune into low-frequency oscillations that resemble a shared internal broadcast. Not information in words, but in space and form, in architecture, in symbolic geometry. In this state, ideas, archetypes, and landscapes may be drawn from a common reservoir of unconscious structures. But this theory doesn't fully explain why dream architecture evolves. People report returning to the same dream city over years, only to discover new buildings, new alleys, new structures that were not there before. They describe the same plazas, but with new monuments, the same corridors, but with new doors. What force updates the architecture? If dreams were personal, only the dreamer should cause these changes. But collective reports show that many people around the world experience these updates at similar times. One eerie wave happened in the early 2000s. Hundreds of people across different countries reported a new dream structure appearing. A tall, spiraling tower with open platforms, described in letters, forums, sleep studies, and clinical reports. The descriptions matched so closely that researchers believed it was an online influence. But many reports came from countries without internet access at the time. The tower appeared spontaneously in the dream architecture of unrelated individuals. Some believed it symbolized global fear or rising collective anxiety. Others believed it was an archetype emerging from human evolution. But a smaller group of theorists suggested something different, that dream architecture responds to shifts in human consciousness as a whole. When the species changes psychologically, emotionally, or technologically, the shared dream spaces adapt. One theory proposes that shared dream architecture forms the background operating system of the human mind. Just as all computers running the same system share the same basic files, all humans share the same deep unconscious architecture. When cultural energies shift, those base structures update, a collective upgrade. The strangest reports involve dream meetings, not symbolic meetings with ancestors or imaginary figures, but meetings between real people. When two people from different continents describe seeing each other in the same dream environment, without knowing one another's existence, researchers struggle to explain it. Are these coincidences, psychic events, or evidence that dream architecture functions like a vast shared world where minds briefly connect? Some people describe being guided through dream structures by figures who feel independent. Teachers, watchers, strangers who act with intention. Are these hallucinations or representations of deeper consciousness? If shared dream architecture exists, the dream might not be a private theater, but a shared city, a place where many minds wander, unaware of their proximity. Another chilling detail emerges when analyzing brain scans. When participants dream of these shared landscapes, the patterns in their brain activity are not chaotic. They are structured, as if the brain is navigating real space. These structures are stable across individuals, suggesting that the dream environment has geometry, boundaries, and laws. The brain reacts as if the dream space is a place, not an image. If dreams are private, that makes no sense. But if dreams are visits to a shared subconscious geography, it becomes perfectly logical. So, what does this mean for human consciousness? If shared dream architecture exists, then every person is connected through invisible bridges built from ancient patterns and quantum-level synchrony. You are not dreaming alone. You are walking through halls shaped by every human before you. You are stepping into cities built from collective memory and emotion. You are entering landscapes drawn by the entire species. And the reason certain dream structures feel so familiar, why a staircase feels like home, why a distant city feels known, why a hallway feels like a place you've walked before, is because in a sense, you have. Not in your personal life, but in the architecture of humanity's collective mind. Dreams then are not just stories. They are maps. Maps of a world we share but do not remember. A world that exists behind our eyes but beyond our individuality. A world where every mind leaves its mark. And every time you dream, you return to that world, to the shared architecture that unites us across continents, across generations, across the silent darkness of sleep. Imagine waking up from a dream that doesn't feel like yours. An image, a message, a symbol that seems deliberately placed, as if someone slipped it into your mind while you slept. For most people, this feeling is just dismissed as strangeness. But in the quieter corners of classified research, in facilities buried under deserts and mountains, there is a theory that refuses to die. The idea that governments around the world have spent decades trying to influence, steer, and even synchronize the dreams of entire populations. Not to puppeteer them, but to test whether the collective unconscious can be nudged into certain emotional states. Fear, compliance, confidence, even unity. They call it collective dream control. And the scariest part, is not whether the technology works. It's that no one can say for sure where the line between normal dreaming and engineered dreaming actually lies. The origins of this idea go back to the Cold War, a time when superpowers believed consciousness itself might become a battleground. Documents, heavily redacted, stretched with black ink, hint at strange experiments where researchers attempted to influence sleeping subjects with synchronized light pulses, subsonic frequencies, and electromagnetic fields. Subjects reported identical dream motifs: blue corridors, ringing sounds, towering figures. Some dismissed it as suggestion. Others believed the patterns were too specific. But the technology back then was primitive, clumsy, almost harmless. Today, the science is different. In the last decade, neuroscientists have discovered disturbing possibilities regarding how the brain processes dreams. During REM sleep, the brain descends into a hyper-receptive state. Its sensory gates loosen, its logical filters dissolve, and it becomes vulnerable to subtle cues. A whisper, a flicker of light filtered through closed eyelids, a vibration at a frequency too low to consciously hear. In this state, the brain is neither awake nor unconscious. It drifts in the narrow space where imagination and reality merge. This state is where dream manipulation becomes theoretically possible. Some researchers argue that if dreams are built from electrical patterns, then external electrical stimulation, no matter how faint, can influence the shape of those dreams. The same way you can nudge a river by placing your hand in the water, you can nudge a dream by placing a frequency in the mind. And certain governments, according to scattered testimonies and anonymous leaks, have tried exactly this. One of the most whispered about experiments involves synchronized dreaming in military units. Soldiers were placed in isolated rooms, monitored with advanced EEG systems, and exposed to identical rhythmic pulses during REM sleep. The official purpose was to test whether collective dreaming improved group cohesion. Unofficially, some believe it was a test of dream alignment, a way to see if minds could be steered to experience the same emotional narrative. After the sessions, multiple soldiers reported dreaming of the same desert landscape, the same abandoned structures, the same symbolic wolves watching from the dunes. None had spoken to each other. None had shared details. Yet, their dreams matched. This is where the idea of collective dream control becomes terrifying. If a group of people can be guided toward the same dream architecture using only electrical pulses, what happens when you scale it up? What happens when you apply it to a city, a nation, the world? Some theorists believe subconscious manipulation might be easier than conscious manipulation. When you're awake, you question. You resist. You filter. But when you dream, you absorb. Your mind doesn't fight images, it follows them. Your emotions respond instantly. Your fear rises without argument. Your hope rises without hesitation. Dreams bypass critical thinking. They teach. They warn. They shape. They mold the subconscious long before the conscious mind realizes it has already changed. Imagine a technology that exploits this. A network of ultra-low frequency transmitters, a web of satellites capable of sending synchronized pulses. A system that could gently nudge millions of sleeping minds toward the same emotional landscape. Not direct control, no nightmares planted with surgical precision, just direction. A subtle tilt. A coordinated push. A way to make an entire population wake up anxious, or calm, or obedient, or unified in a way that feels natural, self-generated, unforced. What makes this theory more haunting is that dream synchronization already happens accidentally. During global events, crises, wars, pandemics, millions of people report dreaming the same symbols: empty cities, tidal waves, masked figures, collapsing towers, endless corridors. Are these coincidences? Or emotional resonance spreading from mind to mind? If emotional states alone can synchronize dreams, imagine what deliberate engineering could do. The scariest rumors come from high-security psych labs, facilities where advanced neuroresponsive fields are tested. Some of these experiments allegedly involve exposing sleeping subjects to specific patterns of magnetic oscillation, designed to simulate emotional atmospheres. Not images, not stories. Atmospheres. A sense of dread. a sense of euphoria, a sense of urgency. The brain, when exposed to certain fields, generates its own imagery to match the induced emotion. This allows influence without direct intrusion. The sleeper never realizes they've been nudged. They only feel that the dream came from within. But the most disturbing idea is not about influencing individuals. It is about synchronizing groups. When multiple minds dream in the same emotional direction, their subconsciouses begin to echo one another. In anthropology, this is called dream convergence. In folklore, it is the shared nightmare. In modern psychology, it is the collective unconscious resonating like a struck tuning fork. But in the hands of governments, convergence could become an instrument, and dreams could become a battlefield. Reports from whistleblowers, anonymous, unverifiable, but persistent, suggest that some agencies already test crowd-level dream shaping during mass psychological operations, not through direct mind control, but through carefully orchestrated stimuli, timed emergency alerts, coordinated sound frequencies in public places, emotional triggers embedded in media patterns. These elements seep into the subconscious. At night, the mind recombines them into dream imagery. When millions of people dream with the same emotional ingredients, the population drifts toward a unified psychological state without ever realizing it. The danger lies in how subtle it is. You cannot defend yourself from a manipulation you cannot detect. A dream does not announce its origin. It simply arrives. And by morning, your emotional state feels like your own. You think your fear is yours, your hope is yours, your sadness is yours. But what if it isn't? What if it was shaped before you even opened your eyes? There is another layer to this story, the possibility of reverse influence. If governments can test methods to influence the collective dream field, then the collective dream field itself might exert influence back. Think of millions of minds dreaming the same fears, the same anxieties, the same symbols. This emotional resonance could create real-world patterns, unpredictable social shifts, sudden waves of unrest, unplanned collective behaviors. If dreams synchronize, societies might move together like flocks of birds turning in one motion. Some researchers believe this could explain certain spontaneous global trends, why fear spreads instantly, why hope sometimes surges globally, why irrational behaviors erupt simultaneously in disconnected nations. If dream convergence has power, governments would not ignore it. They would monitor it. They would study it. They would attempt to harness it. Some theorists argue that the most advanced dream control experiments do not attempt to plant stories or images. They attempt to nudge symbols. Symbols are universal. They bypass language. A symbol can carry emotion across continents, a falling structure, a faceless figure, a sealed doorway, a flickering light. People interpret these symbols differently, but the subconscious understands the emotional message instantly. If a technology could induce symbolic resonance across millions of minds, then collective emotional states could be shaped with terrifying efficiency. Imagine a symbol planted in dreams across a continent, something coded with fear. People would wake up anxious, tense, on edge. They wouldn't know why. They wouldn't connect it to the dream. But their decisions, their behaviors, their reactions would change subtly, and millions of subtle changes can shift the entire direction of a society. But then comes the final, most unsettling idea. What if collective dream control isn't entirely technological? What if governments attempt to manipulate dream fields not by pushing content into people's minds, but by amplifying what already exists there? Collective fear, collective memory, collective trauma, all could be amplified through emotional resonance. In this version, the dream field becomes an ecosystem, a weather system of human emotion, and governments attempt to alter its climate. If even a fraction of this is true, then your dreams might not be as private as you think. They might be part of a larger network, an invisible landscape where minds meet, merge, influence, and get influenced. A place where governments, knowingly or unknowingly, may already be experimenting. And every night, when you close your eyes, you step into that world. Not alone, never alone. Surrounded by millions of minds drifting in the same currents, across borders, across cultures, across the silent darkness where no laws exist. There are moments in your life when something inside you stirs, an emotion that doesn't belong to the moment, a memory you can't place, a familiarity that feels impossible. You stand somewhere you've never been, and your heart reacts before your mind does. You meet someone for the first time and feel an old ache return. You make a choice that feels rehearsed, and somewhere in the back of your mind, a voice whispers that you've lived this before. Not in this world, not in this timeline, but somewhere parallel, somewhere adjacent, somewhere your other selves still walk. This is the phenomenon some theorists call memory bleed, the idea that your consciousness is not singular, but one branch of an infinite cluster, and sometimes the walls between these versions become thin enough for echoes to leak through. Imagine that every choice you do not make doesn't disappear. It becomes real somewhere else. Every path you do not take splits into a new version of you, creating worlds upon worlds where your alternative selves continue living out the stories you abandoned. One version of you moved to a new country. One version stayed in a relationship you left. One version never survived a certain accident. One version succeeded wildly. One version fell apart. These lives continue in parallel, branching infinitely, like rivers dividing again and again. And sometimes, when you're tired or dreaming or emotionally shaken, something inside you slips, not outward, but inward, and you feel traces of a life that isn't yours. Modern physics calls this the multiverse. Quantum mechanics calls it branching states. Ancient mystics called it the mirrored soul. But whatever name you choose, the idea remains the same. You are not alone inside your mind. You are one voice inside a vast choir of selves, all vibrating at slightly different frequencies, all experiencing different worlds. And sometimes those frequencies overlap. This overlap, the interference pattern between parallel versions, creates what we call memory bleed. Memory bleed often arrives as déjà vu that feels too heavy, too emotional, too specific to be a simple brain glitch. It feels like remembering something you lived before, even though you know you didn't. You walk into a street in a foreign city, and your chest tightens because somewhere, another version of you lived there, loved there, suffered there. The emotions spill across timelines even when the events do not. You feel the echo, but not the origin. Some people have dreams that follow a consistent storyline, dreams of living another life, with other relationships, other homes, other tragedies. The dreams feel real, as if they are not fabricated but remembered. And sometimes, the dream life continues where it left off, night after night, year after year. This is one form of memory bleed, your sleeping mind syncing with a version of you that exists elsewhere. Neuroscientists can't explain why these dream worlds remain stable when the brain is supposed to produce random imagery. But if you're not dreaming fiction, if you're tuning into the memories of a parallel self, then the stability makes perfect sense. You're not inventing the dream. You're visiting it. There are documented cases where people remember skills they never learned. They pick up a new instrument and their fingers move with uncanny familiarity. They speak phrases in languages they never studied. They navigate places they've never been with instinctive confidence. Memory bleed offers one explanation. Somewhere in another timeline, you mastered that skill. Somewhere else, you lived in that place. The memory leaks through without context, arriving as intuition in this life. Even trauma can bleed through. Some people carry fears that make no sense within the story of their life. An overwhelming fear of drowning despite never going near water. A terror of car crashes despite never being in one. A deep anxiety around fire despite having no history with it. These fears may not be learned here. They may be inherited from another version of you, a version who lived through the scenario you are terrified of. The emotion bleeds across timelines even if the event does not. Some experience the opposite, a strange resistance to trauma, a calmness in crisis that seems unnatural, as if your soul has survived this disaster before. As if another version of you already learned the lesson and you're benefiting from it. Memory bleed doesn't only bring pain, it can bring strength. A whisper of survival from someone who is you, but not you. Relationships are another place where memory bleed becomes obvious. You meet a stranger and feel immediate trust, or immediate fear. You do not know them, but your body reacts as if it remembers. Maybe in another world, they were your closest friend, or your greatest enemy, or the person who shattered you, or the person who saved you. Your conscious mind knows nothing. There are moments in your life when something inside you stirs. An emotion that doesn't belong to the moment, a memory you can't place, a familiarity that feels impossible. You stand somewhere you've never been, and your heart reacts before your mind does. You meet someone for the first time and feel an old ache return. You make a choice that feels rehearsed, and somewhere in the back of your mind, a voice whispers that you've lived this before, not in this world, not in this timeline, but somewhere parallel, somewhere adjacent, somewhere your other selves still walk. This is the phenomenon some theorists call memory bleed, the idea that your consciousness is not singular, but one branch of an infinite cluster, and sometimes the walls between these versions become thin enough for echoes to leak through. Imagine that every choice you do not make doesn't disappear. It becomes real somewhere else. Every path you do not take splits into a new version of you, creating worlds upon worlds where your alternative selves continue living out the stories you abandoned. One version of you moved to a new country. One version stayed in a relationship you left. One version never survived a certain accident. One version succeeded wildly. One version fell apart. These lives continue in parallel, branching infinitely, like rivers dividing again and again. And sometimes, when you're tired or dreaming or emotionally shaken, something inside you slips, not outward, but inward, and you feel traces of a life that isn't yours. Modern physics calls this the multiverse. Quantum mechanics calls it branching states. Ancient mystics called it the mirrored soul. But whatever name you choose, the idea remains the same. You are not alone inside your mind. You are one voice inside a vast choir of selves, all vibrating at slightly different frequencies, all experiencing different worlds. And sometimes those frequencies overlap. This overlap, the interference pattern between parallel versions, creates what we call memory bleed. Memory bleed often arrives as déjà vu that feels too heavy, too emotional, too specific to be a simple brain glitch. It feels like remembering something you lived before, even though you know you didn't. You walk into a street in a foreign city, and your chest tightens because somewhere, another version of you lived there, loved there, suffered there. The emotions spill across timelines even when the events do not. You feel the echo, but not the origin. Some people have dreams that follow a consistent storyline, dreams of living another life, with other relationships, other homes, other tragedies. The dreams feel real, as if they are not fabricated but remembered. And sometimes, the dream life continues where it left off, night after night, year after year. This is one form of memory bleed, your sleeping mind syncing with a version of you that exists elsewhere. Neuroscientists can't explain why these dream worlds remain stable when the brain is supposed to produce random imagery. But if you're not dreaming fiction, if you're tuning into the memories of a parallel self, then the stability makes perfect sense. You're not inventing the dream. You're visiting it. There are documented cases where people remember skills they never learned. They pick up a new instrument and their fingers move with uncanny familiarity. They speak phrases in languages they never studied. They navigate places they've never been with instinctive confidence. Memory bleed offers one explanation. Somewhere in another timeline, you mastered that skill. Somewhere else, you lived in that place. The memory leaks through without context, arriving as intuition in this life. Even trauma can bleed through. Some people carry fears that make no sense within the story of their life. An overwhelming fear of drowning despite never going near water, a terror of car crashes despite never being in one, a deep anxiety around fire despite having no history with it. These fears may not be learned here. They may be inherited from another version of you, a version who lived through the scenario you are terrified of. The emotion bleeds across timelines even if the event does not. Some experience the opposite, a strange resistance to trauma, a calmness in crisis that seems unnatural, as if your soul has survived this disaster before, as if another version of you already learned the lesson and you're benefiting from it. Memory bleed doesn't only bring pain, it can bring strength. A whisper of survival from someone who is you, but not you. Relationships are. But your deeper layers remember the emotional imprint. This is why some people say, another place where memory bleed becomes obvious. You meet a stranger and feel immediate trust or immediate fear. You do not know them, but your body reacts as if it remembers. Maybe in another world, they were your closest friend, or your greatest enemy, or the person who shattered you, or the person who saved you. Your conscious mind knows nothing. There is a moment that freezes a person to their core, a moment most people never speak aloud because it sounds impossible. You're walking through a forgotten part of a city, or wandering down an empty road, or exploring a place you've never been before, and suddenly you stop. Your breath catches. Your heart clenches. Because standing in front of you is a building you have seen 100 times, just never while awake. You've walked through it in dreams, you've touched its walls, you've climbed its stairs, you know its smell, its air, its shadows, and yet, this is your first time seeing it in waking life. The structure should not exist, and still, there it is. This phenomenon, abandoned buildings that match recurring dream structures, is one of the most haunting mysteries of the human mind. Not because people imagine it, but because the experiences are eerily consistent. Individuals on different continents, living completely disconnected lives, report the same chilling encounter. Stepping into an abandoned school, warehouse, hallway, tower, hotel, or decaying house that mirrors their dream architecture with near-perfect accuracy. The same broken windows, the same peeling paint, the same narrow hallways, even the same impossible rooms. One person described a dream corridor lined with flickering lights and rusted metal doors. Years later, while exploring an abandoned hospital in a distant country, they found the exact hallway. Not similar, the exact one. They could feel where the next turn was without seeing it. They knew a locked room would sit at the end. And it did. Another described dreaming of a half-collapsed cathedral with a stained glass window shaped like a rising spiral of blue and gold. Decades later, in a forgotten European village, they discovered the same ruin, the same window, the same spiral. The dream had been waiting in the waking world. The question is simple, but terrifying. How does the unconscious mind dream structures that exist in reality long before the dreamer ever encounters them? Some psychologists claim it's coincidence or pattern matching. The mind sees a familiar shape and fills in the rest. But the level of detail people recall, the exact room layout, the exact staircase angle, the exact placement of cracks, the exact broken tile patterns, goes far beyond coincidence. These memories feel like returning home, not discovering something new. One explanation suggests that we unconsciously absorb images of buildings through media, architecture, and random exposure. But this does not explain cases where the buildings are isolated, undocumented, or culturally obscure, places the dreamer could never have seen, remote factories in rural districts, derelict houses in forgotten towns, collapsing barns hidden in fields. Why do these appear in dreams before the dreamer even knows they exist? Another explanation is that dreams generate symbolic architecture, and sometimes the waking world coincidentally mirrors those symbols. But this cannot explain the level of precision some dreamers report. They describe the number of steps on a staircase, the position of windows, the shape of hallways, the exact pattern of mold on walls, and when they visit the real building, these features match. Some theorists propose a more unsettling idea, that dreams are not purely psychological. They're architectural memories encoded across consciousness, a blueprint humanity shares. If the collective unconscious holds a library of archetypal structures, then abandoned buildings might simply reflect these archetypes in physical form. In this view, dreamers don't predict buildings. They recall them from a collective memory sphere, the same one architects unknowingly tap into when creating new spaces, as if all structures, imagined or built, come from the same invisible source. But there is another explanation, one that forces us to question how reality works. What if dreams are not memories, but pre-encounters? What if the mind can project itself into future or possible locations long before the body ever arrives? We know that the dreaming brain does not obey linear time. It does not anchor itself to present locations or identities. If consciousness can drift across timelines, across simulations, across probabilities, then dreamers may be visiting locations before they ever physically reach them. The abandoned building becomes not a coincidence, but a rendezvous point between timelines. Some have reported feeling watched when they enter these places, not by people, but by the building itself, as if the structure recognizes them, as if the building has been waiting. In dreams, many describe hearing whispers in these rooms or sensing a presence behind doors that should remain closed. When they return in waking life, the silence feels heavy, charged, familiar. What is this familiarity? Why does the structure feel alive? Why does it feel like a memory instead of a discovery? One possibility involves parallel versions of you. Perhaps in another timeline, another version of you lived near that building, worked in it, died in it, or hid inside it during some traumatic moment. That emotional imprint bleeds into your dreams, pulling you toward places your conscious mind has never seen but your parallel self remembers vividly. When you finally encounter the building in this timeline, your body reacts first. Your soul recognizes it before your mind does. This would explain the overwhelming emotional shock people often feel, an ache of nostalgia, a gut punch of fear, a strange sense of completion. It's not the building itself. They're reacting to the echo hidden inside it. Another theory suggests the buildings themselves carry a kind of psychic residue. Abandoned structures often witness extreme emotions: fear, loneliness, despair, hope, death. These emotional imprints may remain in the walls, floors, and air. Sensitive dreamers might pick up on these vibrations unconsciously, mirroring the architecture in their dreams long before ever seeing it. In this view, dreams become a kind of emotional remote sensing. But then there are cases far more disturbing. Dreamers who describe features of buildings that no longer exist. They dream of structures as they used to be: intact roofs, working lights, furniture still in place. When they find the same building years later, it appears in ruins. It matches their dream exactly, except for the passage of time. This suggests dreams might be accessing a version of the building from the past, not the present, a kind of temporal echo. This merges with the theory that dreams are not tied to the present timeline at all. They travel freely through time, picking up images and memories from decades before. The dreamer becomes a visitor to the building's history. Then there's the most chilling detail. Some people return to these buildings in multiple dreams before ever seeing them physically. And in each dream, the building evolves. A room becomes locked, a new hallway appears, a staircase collapses. When they finally see the building in reality, those dream changes match the real-world decay that happened over years, as if their dreams had tracked the structure's aging, as if the building and the dream were somehow linked across time. This raises a staggering question. Do dreams react to the building, or does the building react to the dreams? If consciousness can interact with physical locations remotely, through dream projection, then abandoned buildings might be the perfect anchors. Quiet, empty, undisturbed by human interference. Their stillness makes them ideal receivers for unconscious signals. A dreamer in another city might touch the building's field without ever knowing it. And when they finally visit, the recognition is overwhelming. In some cases, multiple people have dreamed of the same abandoned building without knowing each other existed. Later, they discover the real location and compare details. Their dream maps match. Their emotional reactions match. Their descriptions of certain rooms match. How can disconnected minds dream the same space? This supports the idea that certain locations act like consciousness hubs, places where dreamers unconsciously converge. The architecture becomes shared. The dreams become shared. The building serves as a meeting point between minds. Ancient cultures believed certain structures, temples, ruins, monuments, were gateways between worlds. Modern abandoned buildings may be the accidental successors of these gateways. Their emptiness creates a liminal zone between reality and dream, allowing memory bleed, parallel echoes, and collective dream convergence. So when you walk into an abandoned building that matches your dreams, you are not experiencing coincidence. You are stepping into a memory that does not belong to your current timeline. You are entering a place shaped by the emotional residue of forgotten lives, collective unconscious patterns, or alternate versions of yourself. And maybe the reason these buildings appear in your dreams is simple. They are calling you, drawing you, inviting you back to something you left unfinished in another life, another world, another version of reality, something waiting in the walls, the dust, the silence. Because some buildings you do not discover. Some buildings discover you. There is a strange profession emerging quietly in the shadows of psychology, anthropology, and theoretical physics. a profession that shouldn't exist and yet feels inevitable the moment you hear it. They call themselves dream cartographers, mappers of the invisible landscapes that appear in human dreams. Their work is not fantasy. It is not metaphor. It is the systematic study of overlapping dream geographies across thousands of unrelated people. Their tools are not telescopes or satellites, but field interviews, EEG dream reconstruction data, neural pattern maps, cross-cultural dream logs, and an overwhelming number of human testimonies, all pointing toward the same unsettling truth. Our dreams share spaces, not symbolically, literally. Across nations, religions, languages, and lives, people report wandering the same corridors, climbing the same staircases, crossing the same bridges, entering the same plazas, and standing before the same impossible structures. These dream spaces recur so consistently that they form recognizable regions, territories, districts, even whole continents that multiple unrelated dreamers describe with astonishing similarity. Dream cartographers don't study dreams the way psychologists do. They do not care about meaning or symbolism. They study structure, architecture, geography, spatial logic, where the hallways lead, where the cities end, which landscapes repeat, which rooms return in different minds. They are explorers documenting a world that isn't supposed to exist. It began with small patterns, hundreds of people describing the same endless hallway lined with dark doors, hundreds more describing a staircase that spirals downward into fog, entire clusters of people reporting a dream city with pale, glowing buildings, narrow bridges, and a river that doesn't reflect light. These were dismissed as archetypes, universal psychological symbols. But then came the anomalies. Groups of people who had never met describing the same exact layout of an abandoned train station. People from different continents dreaming of the same circular plaza with statues missing their faces. Children describing identical dream playgrounds. Elderly people recalling the same unsettling underground tunnel system. And when these descriptions were mapped, they aligned, geometrically, spatially, dimensionally. It was too precise to ignore. Dream cartographers began stitching these recurring dream motifs into composite maps. Separate dreams fused into a single geography. Landmarks matched. Distances matched. Some dream versions included areas others lacked, like different people mapping different districts of the same hidden world. At first, scientists dismissed the idea. Dreams are random, dreams are personal, dreams are shaped by memory and culture, but the maps kept growing, and the overlaps kept increasing. Something was happening that could not be explained by psychology alone. One of the most mysterious regions discovered is what dream cartographers call the Nexus District. It appears in dreams across every culture studied. A cloudy, dim cityscape with tall, windowless buildings and streets that form a perfect grid. Dreamers usually find themselves wandering alone, hearing faint footsteps behind them. Many describe a single lamppost at the center of a courtyard, flickering gently. No one knows why this place recurs or what it represents, but its geometry is consistent across thousands of dream logs. Another region is known simply as the bridge, a long, narrow walkway suspended over darkness or water with no visible supports. The bridge always curves slightly to the right. Dreamers describe the same feeling crossing it: anticipation, fear, or a sense of being watched by something below. Some describe figures at the far end waiting for them. The descriptions match even when cultures differ. The strangest region of all is called the library that changes. Dreamers describe vast halls filled with shelves stretching into infinity. The architecture is impossible. Staircases looping into each other, doorways appearing where none existed seconds before. But the strangest detail is that one particular reading room appears identical in every dreamer's account. A circular room with a single wooden table, a hanging lamp, and empty shelves lining the curved walls. Dream cartographers mapped its measurements based on dream descriptions. They matched to within a few inches. How do unrelated minds generate identical structures? Some believe these shared dream regions reflect universal neural architecture, the shape of the unconscious itself carved into spatial imagery. Others believe dreams tap into a collective memory, inherited genetically or culturally, echoes of ancient structures once real. But the most provocative theory is the one dream cartographers whisper behind closed doors: that dreams are not generated, but entered. That the human mind drifts into shared non-physical spaces, shaped by collective consciousness or some deeper layer of reality. Dream cartographers discovered something even stranger. Dreamers from the same family map different dream regions, while strangers from opposite sides of the world map identical ones. This kills the idea of inherited symbolism. It suggests something else. Perhaps dream access depends on emotional frequency, psychological state, or some unknown neural resonance. Some cartographers believe each dream region is a kind of station, a checkpoint, a shared mental environment where consciousness connects. Not metaphorically, literally. They compare dream landscapes to cloud servers, with minds syncing into shared spaces during sleep. One haunting discovery came when dream cartographers analyzed hundreds of dream reports describing the blue stairwell, a narrow staircase painted in deep blue with a window halfway up. The window always shows cloudy skies, regardless of the dreamer's real weather. Dreamers consistently describe a quiet hum in the walls. When cartographers overlaid dream maps created independently by different dreamers, the stairwell aligned perfectly. But then something happened that terrified the researchers. A pattern emerged, showing paths leading from the blue stairwell to other dream regions. These paths matched across dreamers. Some paths led to the bridge, others to the library, some to regions still unmapped. This meant dream geography had rules: consistent portals, consistent transitions, consistent links. Dreams were connected. This discovery pushed the field from curiosity into obsession. Cartographers began mapping transitions between dream regions. They found that dreamers frequently travel between the same two locations in identical ways, turning left at the same intersection, climbing the same number of stairs, passing the same door with a broken handle. These repeated patterns form what the cartographers call dream currents, similar to currents in an ocean, predictable flows of consciousness through dream space. Where do these currents lead? No one knows. Some dreamers report reaching the edge, a place where the dream world breaks apart into darkness or light. Some report waking the moment they try to move past a certain boundary. The maps show these edges too, places where dream descriptions abruptly stop. Another chilling discovery emerged when dream cartographers analyzed dream populations. Multiple dreamers report encountering each other in shared dream spaces, meeting strangers they later recognize in waking life for the first time. These encounters defy scientific explanation. Dream cartographers collect these accounts, looking for patterns. They find clusters, groups of people drawn to the same dream regions at the same time, often during global emotional events. One of the most unsettling theories growing in the field is that the dream world might not be a product of the human mind. It might be a separate dimension of consciousness that humans access during sleep. A shared world layered beneath waking reality. A world shaped collectively by billions of minds, but not controlled by any of them. Dream cartographers treat this world like uncharted territory. They map it, study it, try to understand its rules. They believe that as the maps grow, something profound will be revealed. The architecture of the human soul, the blueprint of the unconscious, or something even stranger. Proof that the boundaries between minds and realities are thinner than we ever imagined. And maybe the reason some dream locations feel so familiar is simple. You have been there before, not once, but hundreds of times. Night after night, walking the same corridors, climbing the same impossible staircases, drifting into the same fog-shrouded plazas where other minds are wandering too. Dream cartographers can map the paths, but only you know how those places feel. Only you know the shiver of recognition when a dream structure returns. Because somewhere deep inside you, you understand that the dream world is not imaginary. It is another world you inhabit, silently, every night. And now, someone is drawing the map. There is something eerie that happens when the human mind is pushed past its normal limits. When sleep slips away, when the body becomes heavy, when thought becomes foggy, and the world begins blending into a strange, dreamlike haze. In this fragile state, something awakens, a strange sensitivity, a flicker of recognition, a sudden, overwhelming sense that you have lived this exact moment before, that you've heard these words, stood in this place, felt this emotion. Déjà vu, the mystery we usually associate with dreams or spiritual whisperings, becomes far more intense when we are deprived of sleep. And the deeper the exhaustion, the stronger the déjà vu becomes. Sleep-deprived people report déjà vu that feels heavier, clearer, more emotionally charged, almost prophetic. Not the quick flash you feel on an ordinary day, but the kind that stops you in your tracks, the kind that floods your body with a sense of repetition. As if time itself is glitching, and you are standing in a moment that echoes from another version of reality. Scientists call it paramnesic distortion, but that term means nothing to the person feeling it. To them, it feels like a memory from a life they never lived. Why does this happen? Why do exhausted minds experience déjà vu more intensely, more frequently, and more vividly? To understand that, you first need to understand what sleep deprivation does to the brain. When you are well rested, your brain separates memory layers cleanly. Long-term memories stay sealed in one region, short-term memories stay active in another, and the hippocampus acts like a disciplined librarian, organizing every detail as it arrives. But when you are sleep-deprived, the librarian collapses. The walls between memory compartments grow thin. Boundaries blur. Information leaks from one layer into another. New experiences mix with old ones. Perception blends with memory fragments. The brain stops neatly labeling the present as the present. It becomes harder to tell now from before. This is where déjà vu begins. Sleep deprivation disrupts a process called temporal encoding, the brain's ability to mark an experience as new. When this system falters, your mind mistakes the present moment for something it has encountered before, not because you actually experienced it before, but because the brain's indexing mechanism has failed. The moment feels familiar because the brain accidentally stamps it with the wrong temporal signature. But here is where things become uncanny. In sleep-deprived subjects, the déjà vu does not feel like an error. It feels like a message, a warning, a fragment of memory bursting through from somewhere else. Why? Because the sleep-deprived mind enters a liminal state that is neither waking nor dreaming. It floats between consciousness and hallucination. In this space, the boundaries between imagination, memory, and perception become porous. Instead of thinking with one mind, you begin thinking with many overlapping layers of yourself. Sleep deprivation turns the mind into an echo chamber. Some psychologists believe that déjà vu is a form of memory echo, where the brain replays a micro-moment twice, first unconsciously, then consciously. But sleep-deprived déjà vu is different. It does not feel like a replay. It feels like recognition. Deep, emotional, uncanny recognition. The exhausted brain becomes sensitive to patterns it normally filters out, allowing the subconscious to bubble to the surface. This is why sleep-deprived déjà vu often comes with a sense of dread or anticipation. The subconscious is screaming at you, trying to be heard through the cracks. But there is another layer to this. When humans are deprived of sleep, the brain begins slipping into micro-dreams, tiny dream fragments that occur while the person is technically awake. These micro-dreams last milliseconds, too brief to remember consciously. But during these flashes, the brain creates vivid dream imagery or simulations. When you wake back into reality, often just a fraction of a second later, the world feels familiar because your brain just dreamed a version of it. You experience a moment, micro-dream it, then re-experience it consciously. The micro-dream becomes the false memory trigger, and the waking moment becomes its echo. You think you've lived the moment before because, technically, you have, just not while fully awake. This explains why sleep-deprived déjà vu feels so strangely cinematic, so deeply charged with emotion. It is a collision between dream and reality. You're not only remembering, you're reliving. But there's something stranger still. Some neuroscientists believe that sleep deprivation loosens the brain's hold on linear time. Exhaustion disrupts the brain's predictive processing, the system that constantly forecasts what will happen next, based on past experience. When this system becomes unstable, the mind confuses predicted moments with experienced moments. A moment feels familiar because the brain anticipated it milliseconds before it happened. You confuse prediction with memory. In sleep-deprived states, prediction becomes so vivid that it feels like remembering. This creates a loop. The brain predicts, the moment happens. The brain interprets prediction as memory. Déjà vu occurs. You feel like you knew what would happen because your brain actually did. The line between foresight and memory becomes thin enough to tear. But what about the deeper, more disturbing déjà vu? The kind that feels like your soul recognizing something your mind cannot name? The kind that sleep-deprived people describe as reliving scenes from another timeline? This is where the theories step into the surreal. When people are severely sleep-deprived, the boundaries between parallel selves, the versions of you in alternate timelines, may weaken. Exhaustion disrupts the neurological filters that usually isolate your consciousness to one timeline. In this fragile state, you may experience emotional bleed-through from other versions of yourself, from paths you never took, from lives you never lived. Déjà vu becomes the emotional residue of those intersections. This would explain why some déjà vu feels too big to belong to this life, too heavy, too old, too specific, as if it belongs to another version of you watching through your eyes for a split second. Another theory suggests that sleep deprivation exposes the glitchiness of the simulation itself. When the brain is exhausted, it loses the ability to smooth out inconsistencies in the flow of time. You begin noticing the repeat moments the simulation engine normally hides. Déjà vu becomes a brief glimpse at the software running underneath reality, a double render, a reloaded frame, a timeline correction. The sleep-deprived mind becomes sensitive to the seams of the world. Some people feel déjà vu so strongly during exhaustion that they panic. They feel like they are reenacting a scene from a past life. They feel like the air around them has thickened, like the moment is watching them back. Some even report hearing faint echoes, like whispered reminders, or feeling a presence behind them, as if memory itself is a person walking beside them. Hallucination? Possibly. Memory bleed? Maybe. A glitching simulation? Perhaps. But whatever the explanation, one thing is clear. Sleep deprivation reveals something hidden about consciousness, something the fully rested mind never sees. Déjà vu is not stronger in exhausted people because their memories are broken. It is stronger because the boundaries inside the mind are broken. And when boundaries break, worlds overlap. Dreams leak into waking reality. Predictions masquerade as memories. Parallel selves whisper through cracks. The simulation stutters. Time loops. Identity thins. And consciousness becomes a hall of mirrors where every reflection belongs to you, but not only to you. Sleep-deprived déjà vu is not a glitch. It is a symptom. A sign that you are standing in the doorway between what you remember, what you imagine, what you dream, and what you were in 1,000 other possible lives. A doorway most people only pass through during exhaustion, but a doorway that reveals how much larger your mind truly is. There is a question that lingers in the darkest corners of the human mind. A question people feel but rarely dare to say aloud. A question that rises quietly in those moments when dreams feel too real, too coherent, too emotionally charged to be mere imagination. Are dreams the leaks between timelines? When you close your eyes each night, when your consciousness dissolves into that fluid space between awareness and oblivion, something strange happens. You begin to see places you've never visited, faces you've never met, lives you've never lived. You feel emotions that don't match your story. You move through a world that seems familiar, yet impossible. And when you wake up, part of you wonders, where was I? Who was I? And why did it feel so real? For centuries, people believed dreams were messages from gods, or reflections of desire, or random neurological noise. But modern theories have begun pointing at something far more unsettling, something that intertwines physics with psychology, consciousness with cosmology, and identity with infinite possibility. The idea that dreams are not simply creations of the mind, but windows into alternate versions of reality. Versions where another you lives a different life. Versions where other choices were made. Versions where other timelines continue unfolding without you. In this view, dreams are not fantasies. They are bleed-throughs, leaks, glimpses into the infinite branching universes that quantum mechanics suggests must exist. Parallel timelines, parallel histories, parallel selves. The first clue lies in the structure of dreams. Most dreams aren't chaotic. They're coherent. They contain stable architecture, houses that appear repeatedly, cities that persist across years, landscapes that remain unchanged, even as your waking life transforms. If dreams were random, these places would not remain consistent. Yet they do, almost as if they exist somewhere independently of you, waiting for you to return. Some dreamers report living entire lifetimes in their dreams, decades passing, relationships forming, tragedies unfolding. These dream lives feel more vivid than memory, more personal than fiction, more anchored than imagination. And when the dreamer wakes, they feel grief, nostalgia, longing for a life they never lived, or perhaps a life another version of them is living right now in a different timeline. Quantum theory suggests that every decision branches the universe, creating countless parallel outcomes. If consciousness is capable of drifting between these timelines during sleep, then some dreams may simply be your awareness sliding into the experiences of your alternate selves. Not metaphorically, literally. This explains the uncanny realism of certain dreams. The dream where you know every corner of a house that doesn't exist here. The dream where you recognize strangers deeply, intimately, as if you have known them for years. The dream where you speak a language you've never learned or perform a skill you do not have in this world. These are not creations of your imagination. They are memories leaking from another timeline. But there is another phenomenon even harder to explain. Dreams that feel like memories from a place you've never been, but later turn out to match real locations. Dreaming of a city you've never seen, then recognizing it years later in real life. This suggests something beyond imagination. Something like temporal bleed, a cross-timeline echo. Perhaps your dream self visited the place in another version of reality, and that memory slipped through into yours. Then there is the phenomenon of shared dreams. Different people dreaming the same landscapes, the same structures, the same sequences. If dreams are isolated neural events, this should be impossible. But it happens, often. So often, in fact, that researchers have begun mapping shared dream architecture across populations. The same hallways, the same towers, the same forests. If dreams were private, such overlaps would not exist. But if dreams are intersections, meeting points, between timelines, the overlaps make perfect sense. Dreams also have a strange relationship with time. They can jump forward, backward, or sideways through events that haven't happened yet, or that never happened at all. Sometimes dreams predict the future, not symbolically, but literally. A conversation, a face, a room, a moment replaying in waking life exactly as it unfolded in the dream. Critics call it coincidence. But if timelines are constantly branching and overlapping, your dream might simply be picking up a moment from a nearby timeline, a timeline that later syncs with yours. Consider the phenomenon of waking up with knowledge you didn't have before, a solution to a problem, a sudden creative insight, an intuition that feels alien, as if it didn't come from your mind. Perhaps it didn't. Perhaps it came from another version of you, one who learned the skill, solved the problem, or walked the path you have yet to take. If dreams are leaks between timelines, then these moments are exchanges, information slipping through the cracks. But the most haunting evidence lies in emotional bleed. Sometimes you wake from a dream feeling shattered by grief, euphoric with love, terrified beyond reason. Yet, you cannot remember why. The emotion lingers like a ghost. The cause vanishes. In another timeline, another version of you might be experiencing that emotion intensely. That emotional shockwave spills across the boundary into your sleeping mind. You feel the emotion without the story. This could also explain why some dreams feel like warnings. A dream of danger that makes you avoid a situation. A dream of a person that makes you trust or distrust them instantly. Maybe another version of you already experienced the consequences. Maybe that memory leaked into your timeline as a dream. A message from another life trying to save this one. So what happens when the timelines overlap too strongly? When the leak becomes a flood? People describe double awareness, dreams where they know they are themselves, yet also someone else. Moments when they look in a dream mirror and see a different face. Moments when they speak with a voice that isn't theirs. These experiences are unsettling, but they fit the theory perfectly. Your consciousness slipping into the identity of a parallel self, two versions of you sharing the same stream of awareness for a brief moment. And then there is the phenomenon of dream déjà vu, recognizing a dream while dreaming it, knowing what will happen next because you have dreamed it before. Perhaps this is not repetition, but cross-timeline memory. You've lived the moment in another timeline, and the memory leaks into your dream. Even waking déjà vu could be a tiny leak, a moment in which your timeline intersects briefly with another, and you feel the echo of having lived the moment before in a different world. If dreams truly are leaks between timelines, then every night you are traveling without moving. You are slipping between worlds. You are borrowing memories, exchanging emotions, sharing experiences across infinite selves. The dream realm becomes a borderland, a crossroads where timelines meet, overlap, blend, and break. In this realm, past and future dissolve. Identity becomes fluid. Time becomes irrelevant. You are not confined to one life. You are many. You are everywhere your consciousness can reach. And maybe the reason dreams feel so powerful, so haunting, so meaningful, is because they are glimpses of your true nature, a multi-dimensional being experiencing one timeline at a time, but connected to all of them. So the next time you wake from a dream that feels too real, too heavy, too familiar, ask yourself, did you imagine it? Or did you visit another version of your life? Did you walk through a leak between timelines? Did you borrow a memory that wasn't meant for this version of you? Because if dreams are leaks, then your life is bigger than you think. Your story is wider than one reality, and every dream is a doorway, opening into the infinite versions of yourself waiting on the other side.